Hello, my name is Lawrence, and I will be doing my presentation on the Chicago Porch collapse. So this happened on June 29th, 2003. There was a large gathering at a Chicago apartment building in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Long story short, the third floor of the apartment building collapsed, taking down both the third and second story balconies into the basement of the building. This resulted in the death of 13 people and injuries to many others. So after the collapse, there was questions that were raised of whether the building collapsed due to overcrowding or because of the poor design and construction of the balconies. Elliott Dunnick and Associates were a group of Chicago architectural engineers who were tasked to write a report on what they found from the building after the collapse. LG Properties was the company who owned the property and had the balconies built. So this brings into question the decisions that LG Properties made during the construction of the balconies and the building. So not only was the building not constructed correctly, but the porch was built illegally without a permit. There was a lot of building code violations that include the balconies jutting out a foot further from the building than codes allowed. The area was 81 square feet larger than was allowed. The supports were inadequate. The floor was built with undersized lengths of wood, and the screws used to attach the balcony to the wall were too short. So because of the collapse, this led to an investigation, and it was found that 21 other buildings owned by the president of the company, Philip Papas, it was found that all of these buildings also, most of these buildings had similar violations. This resulted in Elliott Dunnick and Associates developing revisions to the Chicago Building Code. This covered loading requirements, railings, and other structural elements for new porches and new balconies. They also started a course for building inspectors for porches and balconies. So values of LG Properties, risk versus benefit. Papa's displayed a lack of safety protocols and was willing to take the risk regardless of the decisions he and his company made. They didn't consider following any regulations in order to benefit from the money he earned from constructing these buildings. It was not until after the collapse that there were changes made to their policies and building codes. They believed that they could get away with constructing more buildings with similar violations in order to benefit from the money they earned. Another value that kind of roots from this is profit versus safety. They were willing to take risks by disregarding the safety of the buildings, balconies, in order to profit from what they get from constructing the buildings. These violations already affected the structural integrity of the balcony, and it was said that it could have withstood the load if it were built properly, but since it was built incorrectly, the balcony collapsed due to overcrowding and overloading. So by abiding by building codes and obtaining a permit for constructing the building, LG Properties could have easily avoided the collapse. And safety is already compromised if someone does not follow the necessary procedures. Along with the mistakes that LG Properties made, the city of Chicago should have updated their manuals for obtaining a permit and updated the building codes on a regular basis. This should have been done way before the incident. Instead, the incident led to a widespread revamp of Chicago's building code and industry standards for construction and review. It should not take an incident to happen because of structural deficiencies to update manuals and building code. They should make sure that every building in the city is inspected regularly to maintain its structural integrity. So the group Elliott Dunnick and Associates had to take a number of actions by the city to respond to this tragedy, and had they been tasked way before the incident to inspect structurally unsound buildings in the city, the collapse could have been easily avoided. And not only that, LG Properties would not have been put on blast for all the violations they committed. Some values I believe that they should have followed was safety. So before the collapse and before manuals were updated for inspections, the city found that the porch was not properly supported and was constructed poorly, which automatically points the blame to the engineers who designed it. And with that said, in 2007, the Illinois Appellate Court ruled the city was not liable for the collapse, and this only means that the blame was on the engineers who designed it. And by not following building code and not properly designing the building, the engineers were not being efficient. And by being efficient, and making sure everything was followed and done correctly, LG Properties could have avoided the collapse and also avoided the blame for other buildings that violated building code. Lastly, reputation. The engineer's decisions affected the city inspectors because many survivors and the families of victims who died sued the city. And not only did it negatively impact LG Properties, but their decision also ultimately negatively impacted other groups who were involved. Papa should have realized that he would not be able to get away with not following procedures for long. Eventually would come back to bite him. Had they considered these values during the construction process, there would have been no loss of life nor money, as there would have been no collapse. So for more lessons, the big one is safety over profit. Safety is already compromised even if one small error in the design of the building or a violation to the building is present. Engineers should learn not to prioritize their benefits in order to not compromise the safety of others. This can also prevent future legal battles and loss of life. Ignoring these codes places a bad image on the engineer's reputation as well as the company they work for. Lastly, risk versus benefit approach. Engineers now in the future should learn not to use this approach because it violates the safety of the structure and harms the public. Overall, engineers should know that it is important to not cut corners, and when designing a structure, and all codes should be followed and to ensure that everything is designed correctly to prevent structural failure. Thank you.